we kind of wanted to put an event on that would kind of educate everyone on what's going on around the world, and we thought that would be a good way to start out that type of education. So I'm going to introduce our speaker here. Her name is Untitled. She's a practicing lawyer here in Flint, Michigan, and she continues to advocate for a Syria revolution through her organizations such as United for Syria, for Free Syria, and other humanitarian.
But what has been happening in Syria is consistently been bad. After the chemical weapons, in these past few weeks, there have been over 20,000 people that have been killed. So what was it about those 14 at the time did not allow for anybody under the age of 35 to be president? Bashar al-Assad was 34. So they're like, oh, there's a constitutional crisis. I remember I was watching it, sitting in my living room watching this, and then it was like break to commercials. When we came back from commercials, it was like unbelievable. Constitution has been amended, to allow for under 35 to be president. So then Bashar became president. And people had a lot of hopes. They thought, okay, he's Western educated. His wife was born and raised in England. She was in the investment business. They were modern. He came from the Alawite sect. It's a minority offshoot of Shiism. And she was from Sunnis, they were more progressive, more open-minded, that somehow there was going to be change. And people gave them time, and people gave them time. This is from 2000 until 2011. Right over Syria and, go find someplace else, because we really didn't think that it was possible to happen. So what happened was there were a few boys in the province of Daraa who graffitied on a wall, "The people want to follow the regime." Okay? And that was the slogan of the Arab revolutions. The people want to follow the regime. So people were looking, and they know what the rest of the world looks like. So people decided that they want freedom. And then on the other hand, you have a dictatorship government that wants to continue to hold power. I mean, that's just what dictatorships do. So it's a very simple sort of breakdown. Now, how to get out of it is obviously a whole complex issue. So let me just talk to you a little bit about what the international community has done. The beginning of the sort of pressure from the international community was those governments that had personal relationships with Bashar al-Assad approached him sort of personally. So Turkey and Syria had very good diplomatic and very good economic relationship. So the Turkish government immediately began sort of, let's talk about this, really need to slow this down. And I remember Iran has given them arms, and Iran actually has fighters there fighting side by side with the regime forces, and Hezbollah from Lebanon, and they also fight side by side with the regime forces. So that was the first resolution, and it failed. Then the Arab League got together and said, let's see if we can pressure, let's try to come up with a plan. And the Arab League and UN Special Envoy, I don't know if you're familiar with Kofi Annan, but he was the Special Envoy at the time, and he came up, brokered this thing called the 6-point plan. And it was a plan that at least, it didn't talk about the transition, a political transition out from the Assad regime to democracy. It talked about basically stopping the killing. So there were 6 points. One was that they had to obviously stop the killing. They had to return their military forces to their barracks, so tanks, get out of cities, get out of neighborhoods. They had to release political prisoners. They had to agree to allow for peaceful protests. They had to agree to stop with the torturing. And supposedly, they had reached an agreement. And Bashar al-Assad agreed to it, but nothing was ever implemented on any level on that issue. Now, hold your horses. So it's not about needing U.S. active engagement. It's about, from my perspective, it's about, that's fine. If our government policy is going to be, we're going to not get involved, then that means we don't get involved at all. And let other people who want to help step up and get involved. Now let's talk about the chemical weapons issue. Because, President Obama said there's a red line, the chemical weapons are a red line, and then he said, we're going to strike, and then he said, okay, well actually, we're going to vote in Congress to see if the strikes are going to happen, and then he said, you know what, forget that, this is a great arrangement. Russia brokered a way for us to get access to the chemical weapons. And this has actually infuriated many of the countries in the region that are now being destabilized, whether it's Jordan. I mean, you should see, I should have brought the picture of the Zaatari camp in Jordan. I mean, they call them cities. The Zaatari camp in Jordan is now the third largest city in Jordan. And it's a camp of refugees. These countries cannot economically sustain all these refugees that are coming through. And with the chaos of the guns and weapons, it's destabilizing for the entire region. So, we are probably going to get involved at some point, but we might not get involved at a point where there's actually something positive for us to do. So,